Today I'm in Lynnfield, Massachusetts with, behind me, a very beautiful car that we have recently acquired that is going to be part of the family here for America's Backroads. We have the Morgan, the 1958 Morgan, and now we have the 1935 Ford V8. So there's going to be quite a few different things I wanted to talk about in today's video. We're going to basically take you on a tour of this car and show you all of the cool things about it. But first of all, I wanted to give you a very brief and simple history of the Ford V8. During the teens and the 20s, Henry Ford and his automobile company was basically the #1 car company in the United States for the manufacture of relatively affordable vehicles. If you wanted a cheap car, Ford was the way to go. They were desirable, they were reliable, and, like I said, affordable. However, during the 30s, things started to change because other car manufacturers found ways to make their cars more affordable and competitive with Henry Ford's vehicles. Some other manufacturers started making more powerful cars too, and Henry Ford wanted to find a way to make a powerful yet affordable and reliable vehicle. So he shut down his entire plant for a year, and in 1932 he came out with the Ford V8, and that is what engine this vehicle has in it. The Ford V8 was, as V8s tend to be, powerful and fast, but more importantly, the Ford's version of the V8 was very affordable. Other car companies had V8s too, but the blocks were cast in multiple parts, meaning they had to be pieced together, and it was very time-consuming, and expensive. Ford's blocks were cast as one single component, and this allowed them to be more affordable and easier for Ford to make. So let's take on a tour of this all-original 1935 Ford V8, and that's something I hadn't even mentioned about this vehicle, is that it's basically all original. Some parts have been replaced and some minor things have been improved on, like there is an additional fan in the front for the radiator. That's kind of a standard thing people tend to do with classic cars. If any parts have been removed, the original parts are actually stored inside the vehicle as of right now, because we are going to be bringing this car back to Tennessee. So to bring all the original parts with us, they are in the back seat of the vehicle. But let's take you on a tour of this really interesting Ford. It's going to be cool. The striking front-end design of this vehicle was a dramatic change from the Model A, which this succeeded. It's a beautiful vehicle. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love the massive, huge front grille. The little kind of subtle but also very cool V8 logo on the front is a very, very nice touch, and it just looks super 1930s-esque and kind of space-agey as well. You can really see how the design of cars led into the super space-age era of the 1950s and early 1960s. It all kind of started here. I really also love the headlights. They are kind of, in one way, part of the body, and at the same time they're also not. In the Morgan, which has a very similar design aesthetic, and we'll talk more about that later, the Morgan has a similar design aesthetic with the curved fenders and the round headlights, but in the Morgan, the headlights are part of the fenders, and here you can see that the headlight mount is kind of welded onto the fender, but it isn't molded into the fender like the Morgan is. So this was kind of a little bit of a hybrid design, I guess you could say, of headlight style. Earlier cars had the headlights that were not really molded into the design like this is at all. They were just kind of hung in midair. That's the kind of appearance they have. These are kind of more molded into the design, and as cars went on, the headlights kind of became one with the body rather than their own light that is separate from the rest of the body. These here are going to be your twin horns. We haven't actually even tried out the horn yet, but that's where the sound would come from, and you can see the massive radiator as well as the aftermarket fan, which is always a great idea to do. Along the side of the car, you have the vents in the hood, and if you can peek through those, you can sometimes even actually see the engine. What's very impressive about this vehicle is that most of the paint on it is actually original. It's wild. And this color, of course, is a color that would have been found in 1935, with the color being original and all, and with many of the original 1935 sales brochures and things of that nature, you'll see Fords of this body style with this exact same color on them. It's called Cordoba Gray. It's kind of more of a tan brown color, but Cordoba Gray is the name they went with. Let's show you the inside of this 1935 Ford, which, like the outside, is all original. So if we take a look here, this is the front seat of the 1935 Ford, and it is one giant seat. It's a big old bench seat. You don't see this today in cars anymore, but back in the day, this was the popular thing. One aftermarket improvement that they've added is some simple lap belts, which are better than no seat belts at all, but originally, this would not have had any seat belts. We can see here that the leather on the seat is, well, original. You can see the seams have kind of popped open in this area. But overall, for 1935, they're in great shape. And the weared leather, the worn leather, honestly really adds character to the vehicle, and it really makes it just feel kind of cool to sit inside. We can see the instrumentation. Well, first of all, this here's the glove box. I'll mention that because it's just right here. There's your glove box. That's how big it is. It's actually kind of lined with fabric, which is really nice. And we've got some what looks like original 1935 documentation there, which is pretty crazy. We can close that up, and I think there's no really latch on it. It just kind of sits there like that. And then we can also talk about the instrumentation. I'm going to go around to the other side and show you that. Over here on the driver's side of the Ford, we have all of the instrumentation. Directly ahead of you, you have your speedometer. You also have some other gauges over here for your temperature and your amperage and your let's see what else. You got your fuel gauge over here, and you've also got your oil pressure here. So good things. I've been told the temperature gauge isn't quite working at the moment, but we'll get that sorted out. What's really important, though, and interesting about this particular car is that it has the rare additional add-on of a radio. I don't know if the radio works or not. I haven't tried it yet. This knob doesn't really seem to be functional, but this one actually is. You can see that it's moving the little dial on the radio there to change your channel. So it's got a radio, and you've got one speaker that I know of right under here. It actually says Ford on the speaker grill, and I'll probably show you a close-up of that later. The crazy thing is you've got all this wiring just here and exposed. You'd never see that in any other car except something from 1935, and being on the inside is actually quite nice. The seats are surprisingly comfy. They might not look terribly comfortable, but actually they are more comfortable. I'd even go so far as to say that they are more comfortable than the seats of the brand new Kia that we rented to drive up here. They feel great. They're really, really nice. And what's kind of cool and rare about this car is that it actually has a back seat. Now, back seats were not rare in 1935, but this particular combination was a convertible four-seat, four-door car. Not too common. And to find one that's in all original, perfectly drivable condition is even rarer still. So let's take a quick look at the back seat, shall we? Here in the back seat of the Ford, it's very Spartan. There's almost nothing for a backseat passenger to do, but the good side is, in terms of, the space and the headroom you have really, really good headroom, and you also have a adequate amount of legroom. I am a pretty short person, but I think someone who is well over 6 feet could actually comfortably fit in the back seat. 3 of them, maybe not so, but certainly 1. The only really interesting thing in the back seat of this particular car is these awards. The current owner, well, I guess that's technically us, but the previous owner, the second owner, won 3 different awards, 2 of them being highly prestigious, the Rouge Award, which is basically a very prestigious award that is given to highly original cars, and it's an award based on originality. I believe this first one, which was won in 2001, was in all 3 categories, which I think were like the mechanics and the paint job and just basically the originality of it. But both of these, and there's 2, it won the Rouge Award twice. We've got 2 of them right here. Both of these are highly prestigious awards, and the fact that the owner is allowing us to keep these and letting them go on with the car is awesome. There's also a second award right here, which was won in 2012 at the 19th Annual Marquis Annual Car Show in Danvers, Massachusetts. Pretty cool. So that is a little tour of the back seat of the vehicle. Like I said, there's not really a whole lot back here, but you do have seat belts, and you've got a grab handle, and you have roll-down windows for the rear seat passengers, and they are functional, as you can see. They go down very, very, very slowly, but they do work. Let's go check out the outside of the back of the car now. It's pretty cool. When talking to Charles Wills and his family, the mention of a very interesting artifact came up in regards to this vehicle, and I thought I would tell you guys about this as well. So when I was talking with him and his family, like I said, he mentioned a magazine article that he once had possession of, but has been lost to time during moves, as things do. And it was an interesting article because it actually featured this very vehicle on the back page of the Ford V8 Times, a magazine dedicated to Ford V8 enthusiasts, and as I said, he no longer had that article. However, thanks to the magic of the internet, we were able to procure a mint condition copy of that very same magazine, and here it is. The Ford V8 Times, the magazine for early Ford V8 enthusiasts. This particular version of it is the Volume 42, Number 2, March-April 2005 edition. And on the front page, you've got this cool Ford, and on the back page is a very familiar-looking car. This is this very car here, the 1935 Ford Convertible Sedan. So this is what that vehicle looked like in 2005, and you've seen what it looks like today, virtually unchanged. And there's a lot of cool things in this magazine. It really is a treasure trove of all sorts of different things related to the Ford V8. And on page 11 is actually the article that talks about this very vehicle, written by Charles B. Wills himself. I will show you the page, this page, as well as the next one that include this article up on screen now, but I'll also read to you a basic summary here of this article. Charles writes about how in 1968 he became interested in old cars and joined the early Ford V8 Club even before he actually owned a vintage car. Way back in 1941, he recalls once owning a 1935 convertible sedan. He'll talk more about that in the interview at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that, but it's kind of interesting. But at some point he sold that particular 1935, but in 1968 he wished to have one again. So in August of 1968, he just happened to be looking at the New York Times and stumbles across an ad for sale under the antique cars category. And it says, the original title of the original listing said, 1935 Ford Convertible Sedan for sale, will sell for the highest offer received by September 1st, 1968. So he called the phone number, found out the vehicle was in Connecticut, which is pretty nearby, and he drove down to go check it out. When he got there, he found that the car had about 50,000 original miles, and that the people who currently had it were the original owners who bought it in 1935. They purchased it for a particular family member who always had wanted a 1935 Ford convertible. That family member had passed away, unfortunately, but the family kept the vehicle and used it as a family car until deciding to sell it in 1968. And during this article, Charles writes a little bit about some interesting tidbits about the vehicle, talking about the original paint, the Cordoba tan or Cordoba gray paint that is mostly original on this vehicle, as I've already talked about in this video. He talks about how the engine was rebuilt in 1985. There's the exact year by a company or an outfit called Knight Engineering. The tires looked to be nearly new when he bought it in 1968, but although they still had plenty of tread, I replaced them with new white wides in 2000, he writes. In 2001, he talks about how the car was driven to, and here's a very long title, the 2001 Eastern National Meet of the early Ford V8 Club of America in Westbrook, Connecticut. That is a mouthful. And at that club, it received its first Rouge Award. I think later on he would also receive a second Rouge Award, which I've showed you. I think that second one was in 2005. Or 2009, I forget the number now. My favorite thing, though, about this article is the last sentence here that he writes, "People ask me from time to time if I want to sell it. My reply is always, no, but call my widow the day after my funeral," which I find very funny. Charles is, as of making this video, still alive at 97 years old. Definitely make sure to stay tuned for that fascinating interview at the end of the video. He actually served 35 missions aboard a B-42 bomber in World War II, which is absolutely fascinating. He's done quite a lot of amazing things in his lifetime, and he talks about some of them in that interview. I'll leave you with this picture of the car, and now let's talk about the rear end of this vehicle. Here is the back of the vehicle, which, much like the front, has some pretty unique styling. Now, I say unique because compared to anything you'd see on the road today, this is really something special, but for the 1930s, this is what you got. This is the styling that they had then, and it really has stood the test of time. Still looks beautiful to this day. So, there's a few things I find interesting on the back of the vehicle, and keen-eyed observers may have noticed that these bumper guards are different on the back than on the front. And that's actually original. This is how they were. If we took a look at the front of the vehicle once again to show you the bumper guards, you'd notice they are subtly different. These are actually from 1934, and the reason for that is because Henry Ford had extras of these lying around, and nothing went to waste at Ford back then, so he just slapped them on the 1935 Fords and called it a day. No one would have noticed, and I wouldn't have unless the owner told me about that. We have the spare tire back here as well, which is kept inside of this protective metal shroud. It looks really great. You have have the license plate bracket thingy over here, which is cool. On the lamp, it says Duo Lamp B. I'm going to assume that it says Duo Lamp A on the other side, but the taillights I find to be very interesting as well, the way they protrude from the bodywork on stocks like that. It's really, really interesting. We can also see that the rear window is incredibly, incredibly tiny. Absolutely diminutive. Is it actually glass? I think it might actually be glass. That's pretty neat. I do not believe that the cloth cover is from the 1930s, but it is certainly old, and that is really, really cool. If we come around back to the front of the vehicle just for one quick moment to show you the bumper guards, on the way we will find the gas cap, and this is where your gasoline would go. The owner runs it off of standard gasoline, which is probably what we will do as well. We also have the original wire wheels here too. If you remember, if you've seen the Morgan, it has wire wheels, and so does this, of a much different design, but nonetheless we have wire wheels on this 1935 Ford. I like the color scheme. The red and the white really complements the Cordoba gray of the vehicle. If we come around back to the front of the vehicle, just for one quick moment to show you the bumper guards, you'll see that they are, in fact, different than the back ones. So there you have that. And while we're at the front of the vehicle, let's take a look under the hood. Under the hood of this 1930s vehicle, you can see that the engine is a lot simpler than what you would find in a car today. We have the original flathead V8, which was restored once in the 1980s. Up top, you have your carburetor, and over here, you have your alternator. Now, the alternator is, as some of you may know, not original to the vehicle. However, the original generator and the original coil are included with the vehicle. We may actually put those on later. The owner ran this vehicle in parade a lot, and so he thought that an alternator would be a little bit better for the vehicle. Everything else, however, in this vehicle is original. The carburetor, the air filter, literally everything else you're looking at is original from 1935, which is pretty wild. The hood design of this may also remind you of the Morgan. Again, more on the design aesthetics of those two vehicles later. The hood opens up either half on both sides, and we can go around and check out the other side later. But much like the Morgan, you have two handles that you push down on. You start on the front, then in the, you start in the back, then in the front, and you push down on those handles, and the hood will kind of pop out and release. And there's actually a little spot here, a little dent that's meant to be there where the corner of the hood will rest. The Morgan has some posts that hold the halves of the hood up, but this has a little dent. Let's go around and check out the other side. On the other side of the engine, there's not really a lot different to look at. You can see the other side of the V8, you can see the other side of the carburetor, but there are a couple of things we're here to talk about. One of them being this horn that perhaps might be aftermarket. I'm not too sure. If you guys know for sure, let me know in the comment section down below. You can also see a couple of plaques here. This one being for the serial number, and you can see that it is definitely original. A lot of times people will buy new, because you can actually do this, you can buy new aftermarket serial number plates, and you can weather them and make them look original and put them back in the vehicle, but this, in this case, is definitely an all-original plate. Again, you can see the way the hood works. You've got a little dent here. The back end goes, the front end just kind of floats there, and when you have a vehicle like this, which I think possibly might also be true with the Morgan, but definitely with this, you have to be careful when you are disconnecting the hood, because you can, in fact, mar up the paint. I'm not really too concerned about this. I think that kind of gives the vehicle a little bit of character, but if you have one of these vehicles or you're looking to get one of them, definitely you have to be careful with this. And once you disconnect both latches, lift the hood up vertically, don't swing it out, which you can get away with doing on the Morgan. So some of you who are watching this and who have seen the 1958 Morgan that is already been featured and is now a permanent part of our growing fleet here on America's Backroads, you might have looked at that vehicle and are now looking at this vehicle and going, why do they look so similar? The Morgan is from 1958, this is from 1935. So why do they have so many aesthetic features in common as far as the body styling is concerned? And I'll detail some of the most obvious ones out to you here. One of those being the long running board that goes under the doors and then swoops up into these beautiful curved fenders that go over the front wheels. You'll find that feature on both this and the Morgan. The round headlights that sit atop these curved fenders is also a feature on both the 58 Morgan and this car, and some slightly earlier models of Morgan had the headlights very much like this that weren't actually molded with the bodywork. They were their own separate bulb here. And the dual-halved hoods, I don't really know what the technical name for this hood style is, but you'll find this on both this 1935 Ford and the 58 Morgan. So why is this? Why do these two cars from such different eras have such similar styling? Well, that's where things get interesting. The Morgan Plus 4, which is the version of the car we have, Morgan has a few different models, but the Plus 4 was originally designed in 1935 for production in 1936. And Morgan just said, you know what? This works. Let's stick with it. And to this very day, Morgan's Plus 4s on the outside have the same exact body lines that they would have had in 1935. It's really, really wild. This vehicle was originally designed in 1934 for production in 1935. So although our Morgan is from 1958, it really is 1935, just like this. In design anyway, which is pretty wild. So that is why the design of this 1935 Ford looks so much like a 1958 Morgan, or in fact any Morgan Plus 4, because the design of the Morgan Plus 4 is basically, for all intents and purposes, from 1935. So I thought that was a really cool little tidbit. We didn't really intend for the two vehicles we have on America's Backroads to basically be from the same era, but they're beautiful, and I love cars from this era. They look so cool, and driving this vehicle and cruising around in it is actually really, really nice. It's, in fact, even easier to drive than the 1958 Morgan. So I think it's about time we showed you the startup procedure and went for a quick little drive in this. So the startup procedure for a 1935 Ford is surprisingly simple. It's a lot different than what you'd find in a modern car or even other vintage cars, but it's actually surprisingly simple. Something I forgot to mention earlier is that the driver has the luxury of an armrest. But onwards with the starting up procedure. We are currently in first gear. This is your shifting lever here. So to put it in neutral, which is always the first step, we're going to push the clutch in, we've got the handbrake on, and we're going to put it in neutral. So this is in neutral. Next up, we're going to take a look here at the steering column, and we have the key, and we have this weird little switch here. Now, a modern car, to turn it on, you turn the key to the right. On this, you turn the key to the left. You'll hear it make a really satisfying little click. Actually, it didn't do it that time, but it has before. Now, we're almost ready to go. With this little switch here, we push down, which does make a satisfying click. And now we're ready to go. We're in neutral, just confirming that. And to start it up, it's a push button start. On the floor that you push with your foot. Yeah, check this out. Easy as that. We're ready to go. Let's go for a drive. So I really hope that you all have enjoyed this first video with our new old friend, the original 1935 Ford. Now, here's the really big thing, and this is something I alluded to in a previous video on this channel. I mentioned at the end of the Tweetsy Trail bike video that, oh, there's something big coming. And that something big was this, but the even bigger thing is that we're driving this home to Tennessee. Yep, we're gonna do it. We've already turned in our rental car because we saw how well this thing ran. And so now we're here in Massachusetts, north of Boston, and the only way to get back home to Tennessee is this 1935 Ford. So on the way home, unless something breaks down, in which case we will trailer it back home, along the way we're going to be planning on visiting all kinds of really cool historical things and anything else random along the way. Here in Linfield, there's some cool stuff I might want to visit, but on the way home as we go through Boston, we're going to be checking out some really cool things. I'm planning on checking out the Freedom Trail. There's 16 or 17 different really interesting historical spots along the Freedom Trail, like Paul Revere's home and the USS Constitution, two of my favorite things I'm looking forward to there, but many other cool things too that were pretty pivotal in the making of the United States of America way back in the 1700s and even before. So that's going to be really cool. We're also going to be checking out, we might go drive along the coast and go see all kinds of cool coastal things along the east coast of the United States of America. Might go check out Kitty Hawk and all kinds of other cool historic things like that. We're going to be going all the way up to the tip of the little peninsula on Massachusetts and checking out Provincetown and all kinds of other neat things like that. So if you guys are all interested in this, definitely stay tuned. Every week we're going to be posting a video featuring this car until we get it home, and then we're going to be doing Morgan and Ford videos until maybe a third car? I don't know. We'll see what happens then. But for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Definitely stay tuned for all the cool things we've got planned with this bad boy. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.